Day 27. So yesterday I was watching a movie, Voces, Inocentes. I'll put a link down below. I mean, it's in Spanish. I'm not sure if there's a version out there with English subtitles, so it might be hard to understand if you don't speak Spanish. But it's a movie about, apparently it's based on a true story, or rather, I think it's one of the writers or the director of the movie. I don't quite remember exactly which one, but essentially it's like his telling of what happened during the Salvadoran Civil War. It's a tough movie to watch, man, because you see, this wasn't too long ago. This was back in the 1970s, 1980s, and you see what happens when communities, or rather I say families, when families get disrupted and destroyed. Like, you see government soldiers recruit, I say recruit in quotations, they go recruiting for new soldiers, but what they do is they go into neighborhoods, they go into the schools, and they forcibly take these young boys and force them, again, to fight a war that they cannot only comprehend, they cannot, but I doubt any of the adults that were making these policies or providing justifications for this war could comprehend. Because at what point, like when you're, say you're in charge, and you have your military rounding up teenage boys and then training them to go fight against their own brothers, their own sisters, their own country, like, what's gained out of that? What is the purpose of all that? And I've been thinking really hard about if something like that would happen in the United States. The reason that I think about it is because I think about the challenges that other people have gone through, challenges my own family went through. My own dad lived a part of that war before he came over to the United States. And just to think about the decisions that you're faced with because other people decided to start a war that probably doesn't benefit you in any kind of way. Like, you're not the one making money off this war. You're just trying to survive. You're trying to live your life. You're trying to make do with what you got. And your whole entire lifestyle is disrupted. You gotta worry about your sons being recruited and being killed in a war that you, I mean, I don't say don't understand, but don't see why it's going on. And I think about something like that were to happen in the United States. Like, how would I react? What would I do? It's scary to think about, because these were Salvadorian citizens, again, boys being recruited to go fight. They had no choice in the matter. They can't consent that that's something that they want to do. And like, what happens when the war is over? What happens to these young men that did survive? Did they go back to their families? Like, do they stay in the military and carry those lessons and then try to make sure that kind of shit never happens again, so that way other kids don't have to experience what they had to get experience through? Like, would they send their sons to go fight in a war like this? And I think that's the biggest thing, right? That it seems that the ones who are always trying to go fight wars or go fight another human being, they're never the ones actually in the ring. and they're not going to send their kids to go fight these wars. So it's like, how have we allowed ourselves to live in a society where that's possible? Granted, the United States is a little bit better, it's all volunteer, but there's other countries where child soldiers are still a thing. Just watching this movie, man, was fucking brutal. It was just sad because now my life is taking on a new dimension. I'm about to become a father, and it just got me thinking, like, what would I do if my government tried to take my son away, to go force him to fight into something that he has no business in? His job as a kid is to be a fucking kid. His job as a teenager is to be a fucking teenager, not to go pick up a rifle and fight against people that look just like him because of some policy, of some law, some other person's financial gain, some other person's game that they're playing because they want to stay in power, and they want to it doesn't make any sense to me. It makes zero sense to me. And it just got me thinking, like, fuck, man. Like, what would I do? What would families do here in America if they were faced with just a situation like that, where it's total war, right? So in the movie, they were showing how some of these soldiers were stationed right outside of mountain towns, mountain villages. I don't want to say it's like this because it's not. The climate in El Salvador is a little more tropical, a little more humid. But a lot of them, some of the poor people lived in these little small little mountain towns, mountain villages, but they're surrounded by family. And then you have these government soldiers living up there, setting up little blockades, little checkpoints, because again, they're looking out, or rather they're trying to search for these guerrilla fighters that are also part of that town, or maybe they moved into that town and have found support with the people there, and they're trying to uproot all that, catch these guys. And then these people are supposed to go on with their lives. They're supposed to go to work, provide for the kids in the middle of a fucking war. There's a scene in the movie. I don't want to give too much away, but there's a scene in the movie where the main character, Chava, and his sister, when they hear gunfire, they don't act surprised. They don't act scared. Of course you're scared, but their main focus is to make sure that their little brother is okay. That's what they're concerned about, because they've been through this shit so many times, or they've gotten so accustomed to the gunfire, to the raging battles going on in the middle of the night between the guerrilla fighters and the government soldiers, that they're so accustomed to it that their instinct is to grab their little brother, put him as low to the ground as possible, and keep him quiet. Keep him as quiet as possible so he's not being scared by the gunfire. Bullets whizzing over their heads. Like, that shit's fucking crazy, man. Like, and then what happens to those kids as they grow up, they get older? It's all tragic, man. It's very sad to think about, because again, it's something that's still going on. Humans still wage wars against each other. And like, it's not that I don't see that ever changing, but if you decide that that's the option, like, I need you to fucking zip up your boots, go pick up a rifle, and then you go fight. It's cowardly to be the one to tell other people to go do it, but you don't do jack shit. It's the ultimate form of hypocrisy, that you're telling other people to go do something that you're not willing to do yourself. Yet, it's a system of government that a lot of countries have. So again, just watching this movie, it just made me really think about the importance of family, the importance of protecting your kids, and not just protecting them, but like really trying to let them be critical thinkers, to like raise kids that, I mean, I think ultimately one of the biggest things about having kids is you want them to have a life, a greater floor than what your personal ceiling was. So your ceiling is where they start off at, right? You don't want your kids to grow up in the Civil War. You don't want your kids to, you don't want to worry about your kids going to school because your son might get snatched up by somebody and then been forced to fight, and you'll hear nothing of him. Either 6 months later when he comes home after his training, or 6 months later because he's been killed. Like, you don't want that, man. And for other people to create these policies and decisions, they create those realities for other people. It's just like, man, what the fuck? What kind of human world have we started to create with all these rules and regulations that we've come to accept as like normal, as like this is just part of life? Because if you think about it, if you're out here in nature, the only rules that are out here is you gotta survive, you gotta live. How you do that is really up to you. But now we live in a world where we're not living off the land like this anymore. There's abundance for everybody. Yet you have people creating situations that deny them even the opportunity to have access to that kind of abundance. It's fucking crazy, man. It's fucking crazy to think about. And it's really got me thinking about the role of men, because one of the interesting things about this movie is that the only men that you see are the ones that are in the government, in the army, fighting this war. The guerrilla fighters that are up in the mountains, hiding out in the cities, fighting against the government. Or the drunks and just regular dudes working their jobs to help keep the life going for everyone else. Help it keep it going to make it as normal as possible. And it made me really think about that. Like, why is it that in all these little towns, these little villages, the only thing you really saw were strong women? It was the women who were in charge of the family. It was the women who were leading everything. It was the women who were trying to protect their sons from going off to go fight in this war. Where did the men go? Right? Where did the fathers go? Where did the uncles? And I guess in situations like that, where as a man, you're either gonna be forced to go fight with the government and get drafted, and if they can't convince you because you're doing it out of patriotism or honor, they'll force you through violence. They'll coerce you through violence so you can keep this war machine going. Or you get sick and tired of what the government soldiers are doing. Come on, man, let's go. You get sick of what they're doing, and you go join the campesino fighters out in the mountains. Both very likely options for those choices is that you end up dead and getting shot or getting murdered by the other side. Or what do? Do you go try to flee and go to another country, uproot your entire life, leave your family, your friends? I mean, I'm sure so many people lived in these communities for years, for generations. All of a sudden, you have to uproot the whole entire thing to go to a completely different country where you don't know the culture, you don't know the people. Yeah, man, these are all like hard decisions, and I don't think there's a right or wrong answer to like any of this. It's just immediately really like forced me to start thinking about how bringing a son into this world, what kind of example do I want to show him? Again, not saying that some shit like that will happen in America. It's possible, but I don't think it's likely. other countries. Yeah, again, Myanmar's going through this. Now Israel and Palestine are going through something like this. Whoa. So it's just one of those things to think about, that I am thinking about. Again, it's just one of the things that I've been thinking about lately is like, do you, as a human being, regardless of where you're at, how much of your personal safety do you outsource to someone else? For example, here in the United States, for the most part, it's the police that keeps us safe. And I know there's a lot of people who would not agree with that. They think that we shouldn't have police, but that's a whole different conversation. But generally, that's the role of the policing community, is that they're here to make sure that citizens, for the most part, can go about their lives doing what it is that they want to do without breaking any of the laws in relative safety, right? So you're living your life, you live your life. Cool. You have no reason to fear the police. Granted, if you're black or brown, it's a whole different other story. But the main idea is your safety is not your responsibility. Or rather, I should say, it's not your responsibility. It's just that if something were to happen, you don't solve it yourself. You have the police come in and help you out with that, right? But what happens when the community that is supposed to be protecting you and help keeping you safe are the ones doing the abusing? They're the ones who are terrorizing you. Then what do you do? Who do you go to when something like that happens? And I think here in the United States, right, it's a fair question to ask. Like, what do you do? Say, for example, you're living in your home and you're being terrorized by somebody. You'll call the cops. Cops will come. You have a neighbor you have a conflict with. Hopefully, cops can settle it. If they don't, the person gets arrested. They go to jail. They learn their lesson, get rehabilitated, and then come back. End of story. But what happens when it's the police, or the ones who are supposed to be in charge of your safety and of policing, the ones doing the terrorizing of people? Like, then who do they turn it to, right? In this movie, one of the biggest things you realize is that these moms relied on their network. They relied on their family, on their grandmas. They relied on their uncles. They relied on the brothers. They relied on people that they knew and that they trusted to help them out. But if it gets bad enough to where you're on your own, you don't have family to help you out, you don't have that strength in numbers, then what do you do, right? What can you do? You gotta protect yourself. How do you protect yourself against someone who's terrorizing you? I mean, what's the quickest way? Learn some self-defense. If it's a school bully trying to take your lunchbox, you learn how to fight. Now, if they got weapons, they got something else. What's the next logical thing to do, right? Is you do the same thing. You pick up the same kind of arms they have and you practice and you train with them. So if the situation does arise where you have a terrorizing force, an occupying force, someone that tries to bully you or use violence to coerce you to do things that you don't want to do, and you're not fucking with them, you're just trying to live your life, and your existence is enough for them to try to eradicate you, to terrorize you, or to frighten you, or to take things from you. Like, man, of course, even in the animal world, right? Out here, predators don't have it so easy. They can't just snatch up some prey, eat them, and then kill them. No, it's like most prey have developed these defenses to try to fight against these predators. Why? Because they don't want to give up their life for them. And it's the same thing in the human world too. Hey, same thing in the human world too. Hey, stop. Sit. No. And understandably so, right? You got every right to be here. Come on. You have every right to be here, just like they do. So why would you give that up? So again, it's just been just watching that movie really has made me reflect on a lot of this, like how I want to lead by example with the stuff that I want to do. so that way my son understands that yes, we live in a country. Again, it's not perfect. There's no such thing as perfection. The United States is not perfect at all. It has its issues, just like everything else in the world. But I think what's important is that at what point do you take ownership and responsibility for your life, so you're not relying on someone else to give you answers, someone else to tell you how you're supposed to protect yourself, someone else leaving your hands in the fate of someone else that is very susceptible to corruption, to an abuse of that power. Like, you gotta have that check. You gotta have those checks and balances. I mean, yeah, it's really, really heartbreaking to think about this movie. Come on. Shh. Stop. Sit. Nope. Come on. Right, and I think one of the biggest things, at least for me, is just knowing how to defend yourself if it comes. Again, this just that idea of being in a civil war where you got Americans fighting Americans. I mean, it already seems like that online right now. It already seems like that online, where you can't post anything without people automatically trying to attack you online. Again, it's not the healthiest way to live, because when you go out in real life, people tend not to talk to you that way. They don't. Politics is the last thing that they start arguing about, at least face-to-face in person, because I think it's much harder to do that kind of shit face-to-face when you're looking at someone in the eyes. Online kind of makes it easier to be an asshole to people, but it's just this movie brought up a lot of interesting questions and things that I do want to talk to my dad about, talk to my family about, again, talk to my wife about. Just if something like that were to happen here, how would we react? What would we do? Would we try to leave? Would we try to stay here? Survive it out? How do you do that if your water's cut off, your electricity's cut off? You got an internet, you got no way to communicate with somebody. How do you communicate with the outside world? Do you have good relationships with your neighbors? Do you have good relationships with your community, with your family? Do they know where you're at? Do you have any other ways of communicating with them? Right, because I think in the society that we live in now, it's very interconnected, but it's also very dependent on other people. That's both a good thing and a bad thing. Good thing because I hope it makes us appreciate the trash man, the barista at the coffee shop who you get your espressos from, the people that you see in your everyday lives that help, again, behind the scenes, help you live the life that you want to live. Now, if all that goes to shit, you find yourself without any of that, any of those resources or access to those resources, what do? How do you survive? Do you have any backup plans? Do you just pack up and leave, or are you pretty well prepared? I know there's a lot of doomsday preppers out there that are very well prepared for something like that and are probably waiting for something like that to happen. But again, who knows, right? This war happened back in the 1970s all the way up until the 1990s almost. I think it was the beginnings of it. Anyways, that's not that long ago. El Salvador's not too far from the United States. We got something similar going on in Myanmar right now, so again, it's just I see these things and I think about these things and I think about what that would be like down to my personal life and how it would affect my personal life. I guess my goal in thinking about all this, or trying to imagine what all this would be like, is just to, be prepared. I think one of the things that we human beings have a tendency to do is to procrastinate, to assume just because everything's good, it's going to stay good. Or the flip side, if everything's bad, it's going to stay bad. And we don't ever think we can overcome those conditions in which we grew up in. For example, you live in the hood, you grew up on food stamps, right? If that's all you see, more than likely you think this is what my life's going to be. But no, that's not true. You can always overcome that through sports, through education, through finding some sort of mentor, some sort of opportunity, just being open. First off, having the idea that you can live a life that's not in the hood. It's always like a first step, just the thought and the idea, the possibility of that happening can help you find the way to actually get out of that situation if you wanted to. Yeah, I think it's a good exercise to think about. That when it's good, appreciate when it's good. But don't always expect it's going to be good. Because I know for a lot of people, last year was absolutely terrible, but I've had a pretty decent year. I have nothing really to complain about. My life is pretty good. I'm doing the things that I want to do for the most part. Again, like just coming out here and hiking with my dogs. I got access to this on the daily. Again, I'm grateful for what I have. I'm grateful, but I also know that this can always change. And after watching that movie, man, it just really hit home, because it made me think, fuck, this was my father's generation. My father went through this, something similar to this. That wasn't that far back in time. What if this happens again? You know, I don't want that shit to happen. But what if something like that does? What do we do? How do we survive? How do we take care of our families and overcome the situation? Anyways, this was story 27. Story 27. Out in the woods, getting to solitude with nature and dogos. Just thinking things out. Love your life. Till next time.